cannot promise when I'll be at liberty to return. I will endeavor to be back tomorrow, but it could very well be the following day. You put my canteen out first, I believe. Who knows what you've packed in that haversack for me?
I don't know which weighs more, Jenny, you or your gear.
Now, Mrs. Madison, how dare you say such a thing? I'm doing quite well as it is. Thank you very much. Oh, Mrs. Madison. Dear wife, do you have the fortitude to stay here under such uncertain circumstances?
My only fear, Jenny, is for your safety and for the success of our army.
Keep yourself occupied, but not distracted, by collecting all of the cabinet papers, both public and private.
James. Oh.
Must I?
You must. You are the commander-in-chief, my love. You must wear a military hat.
I think it's a bit silly.
Oh, nonsense. You look so very martial in it.
I don't feel so very martial.
Well, it would mean so much, Mr. Madison, and it would help for the edification of our troops if you were to wear a military hat. It will show them your confidence in them. Now, be my great little Jenny Madison and wear the round hat, will you?
Yes, of course, my dear. I shall wear it solely for the purpose of the edification of our troops.
Much better.
I shall pine for you.
Oh, not any more than me, my sweet. You shall always be at the forefront of my thoughts.
My beloved, I have reviewed the troops, and they are in high spirits and make a good appearance. The enemy, as reported by General Winder, is not in a condition to strike at Washington, but they might have a greater force, or their temerity may be greater than their strength. After interrogating 2 British deserters, it was revealed that the British Army is advancing. Secretary Armstrong still contends that they can have no such intention. They are foraging, he supposes, and if an attack is militated by them, the target would be Annapolis. It is simply too difficult to ascertain what the true conditions are. Nonetheless, I am anxiously anticipating taking you in warm embrace on my return tonight. All my affection embraces you. James. Gentlemen, the message alerts us that the British are advancing on Bladensburg. Upon considering all the facts of the situation, we must do the following. General Winder, you are to depart immediately to meet up with the front line and our troops. Secretary Armstrong, upon his arrival, will be dispatched immediately to meet up with you. Barney, you and your troops will accompany Mr. Rush and myself to the front lines. I concur with Secretary Jones that the taking of the Navy Yard would greatly extend the field of plunder and devastation. Therefore, Captain Tingey, should the British enter the city, you are to destroy the Navy Yard. You have your orders, gentlemen. May God be with you all.
August 24th, 1814. Wednesday morning. 12 o'clock. Since sunrise, I've been turning my spyglass in every direction and watching with unwearied anxiety, hoping to discern the approach of my dear husband and his friends. But alas, I can descry only groups of military wandering in all directions, as if there was a lack of arms or of spirit to fight for their own firesides. My dear sister Lucy, I have since received 2 dispatches from Mr. Madison, written with a pencil. The last is alarming, because he desires that I should be ready at a moment's warning to enter my carriage and leave the city, that the enemy seems stronger than he had been reported, and that it might happen that they would reach the city with intention to destroy it.
My dearest, it is now noon. The sun is beginning to shine its full power upon us. There will be a battle. We are facing the enemy this instant. The combatants will not only be men, but the elements. I hear reports that men are succumbing to heat stroke even before reaching the battlefield. The British are beginning a launch of their Congreve rockets. There is no way of knowing exactly where these bombs will explode as they swirl around randomly in the air. The red glare they produce is distracting the men, as they have never seen such a sight. A rocket has burst close to our position, so I have directed our party to fall back about a mile to the main line. General Winder provided us with an army escort to lead us away from the field. It is now evident, although we are superior in numbers and hold a good position, the men are not returning volley. Secretary Armstrong, what orders have you given? It is up to General Winder, you say? As you assume that our militia, being faced with trained British troops, will lose? You are giving up in this obvious display of cowardice? Mr. Rush, I can scarcely conceive it possible that General Armstrong could have so misconstrued his functions and duty as Secretary of War. I am much grieved to see the great resolve of the Secretary, who seems to be taking no part on so critical an occasion.
Sister, I am accordingly ready. I have pressed as many cabinet papers into trunks as to fill one carriage. Our private property must be sacrificed. I am determined not to go myself until I see Mr. Madison safe, and he can accompany me. My friends and acquaintances are all gone. French John, our faithful domestic, with his usual activity and resolution, offers to spike the cannon at the gate and to lay a train of powder which would blow up the British should they enter the house. To the last proposition, I positively object, without being able to make him understand why all advantages in war may not be taken.
Mr. Rush, these men have no intention to fight. They are scattered around in complete disorder. Where is General Winder? Did he not instill any fighting spirit in our troops? We had a distinct advantage at Bladensburg. I fear that General Winder has made a decision upon the first volley to immediately retreat. Perhaps it is not his resolve that we should question. Perhaps it is the resolve of Secretary Armstrong's.
Sister, our kind friend, Mr. Carroll, he has come to hasten my departure. He is in a very bad humor with me. I insist on waiting until the portrait of General Washington can be secured. It requires to be unscrewed from the wall. This process was found too perilous, and I have ordered the frame to be broken. And the precious portrait is now placed in the hands of 2 gentlemen from New York for safekeeping. And now, dear sister, I must leave this house, or the retreating army will make me a prisoner in it, by filling up the road I am intended to take. Where I shall be tomorrow, and when I shall again write you, I know not. Godspeed.
Mrs. Madison! Mrs. M! Are you here? Where is everyone? Not a soul to be found. I see she was enamored enough of her doings and was able to complete all her duties, including setting the table for dinner. I doubted her not in the least. Oh, look. She has chosen to leave all her precious personal belongings behind. Her gowns, all but her most precious jewelry. President Washington. Mrs. Madison, you are a wise and astute woman. Admiral Cockburn will not claim that painting as a prize of war. Good work, Mrs. M. I see she was enamored enough of the red velvet curtains to have taken them. What is left is still most enticing, for the looter is sure to come. God help us. Gentlemen, it is time to evacuate. We must move to meet Reverend Baffert at Salona.
Mr. and Mrs. Love, thank you so much for your gracious hospitality. We are due to meet Mr. Madison and his party at Wiley's Tavern, so please forgive me my haste. I am very, very anxious to see my dear Mr. Madison alive and well, so please, thank you again for your hospitality, and be vigilant. Thank you, and goodbye.
Good morning, Reverend. So nice for you to have hosted us today at Salona. Apologies for the hurried rush. I hear that Mrs. Madison's party has made it en route to Wiley's. I'm so relieved. I'm so happy to hear that she is safe. Gentlemen, let us depart. Come, quickly. My wife is waiting for me.
My goodness. What is this wind and rain all of a sudden? You see the storm outside. I have never seen weather this horrible come in this quickly. You can see the weather coming in right over Washington City. Oh, I do hope that my Mr. Madison is well. He must make it to me. The only blessing is that these winds and this rain should help to put out the fires in Washington City. Dear, listen to the wind. Do you hear it? Mr. Wiley, are you sure that your roof is attached securely? Mr. Edmonds!
Alas, my beloved, we are reunited. I knew we would find each other.
Here, let me look at you. Are you all right? Have you been hurt in any way?
No, my only hurt was for the want of you. But look at you. You are soaked to the bone. Are you chilled?
I'm fine, my love. But I must look like a drowned rat. Oh, I am so overwhelmed to see you safe. I did think the wind might blow your little Jemmy away.
Come. Let us take a chair by the fire, and we will warm you up.
What if I didn't find you? I don't know what I would do.
It's over now, James. We're together.
Indeed, my love.
That was an excruciating experience, being away from one another for so long.
You know, I was commander-in-chief, but I felt that my top duty was to make sure that you were safe. You were so brave, my darling, to stay in the president's mansion for so long, until the moment of your peril. I'm so proud of you.
I was preparing a dinner for many of our friends that evening, as we had done many times before, to reassure our fellow Washington City friends that there was no danger and there was no harm in staying in the city, and how very wrong we were. But as I prepared the meal, more and more letters kept coming in from our invited guests saying that they would not be joining us that evening. And when it seemed I would sit all alone at the table by myself, I knew it was time for us to take leave.
Well, can you see that it is a mark of Virginia hospitality, my dear, that at least they did send a letter.
And it is a mark of Virginia hospitality that those invading British soldiers got to eat all our food.
Apparently so, yes. We did have a full table for them. Indeed. Well, let's talk about happier times, shall we?
We'd never been apart from one another. That was the longest time, except for once when I had some troubles with my knee and was infirm up in Philadelphia.
Indeed. I was Secretary of State to Mr. Jefferson, and it was 1805, and we were dealing with the Napoleonic Wars and the Barbary Wars, and I knew that Mrs. Madison's knee was troubling her so bad it had swelled to the size of a grapefruit, and it was paining her so much she could not even put weight on it. So I said, I know who to take you to, Dr. Physic up in Philadelphia, the best known physician that I knew of. He would take care of her.
He said he could cure me in a couple of weeks, and then months went by. It seemed it would go on forever. The knee kept getting worse and worse, more swollen and more painful. You came to visit me once during that time, I believe, but it wasn't enough. I really was lonesome up there all on my own.
Well, I think you wrote a letter to someone that said something on the order of that the friends of her society had vilified her for entertaining the way she does, and she had left Philadelphia. She was formerly married to a Quaker, and she was kicked out when she married me. Did you know that?
I got myself kicked out for other reasons long before.
Mrs. Madison has not a lack of personality traits, I will tell you that. And she has made my life so much more exciting and bearable.
Well, the Friends always had taken some issue with my style of clothing and my behaviors. I personally think I'm an affable creature and a sociable creature at that. And perhaps my Quaker brethren, my fellow Friends, are not inclined to socialize in the way that I do.
But you see, Mrs. Madison's personality has actually helped save my administration. Mrs. Madison is not only a great entertainer, she's a power broker and a conciliator. I consider her part of my administration.
Oh, I can say that under the Jefferson administration, there was very little of the political parties mingling together. And it was not until we were living on F Street, you remember, in Washington City, and we would host parties at our home, Wednesday evening squeezes, I call them. And if you had a calling card from me, which I will give every single one of you one before you leave today, you could come to our squeezes, just no riding boots in the house. We squeezed as many people as we could into our home there on F Street, and it was there for the first time that Federalists and Democratic Republicans came together under one roof.
Indeed. You see, the capital city has been laid out not very much unlike Philadelphia. It is not tight and confined as all three branches of our government were within sight distance of each other within one block. But you see in our current capital city, the Capitol lies about 1.5 miles away from the executive mansion. And the clumps of House members, senators tended to stay together. And Mrs. Madison's contention was that we needed to mingle because what was there to do out in the swamp? Not too much. So Mrs. Madison formed these gatherings that were called squeezes because once we went to the Oval Office as well, she could fill 400 people, and they would come from all around, miles and miles away. Now we had some digging their elbows all the way into the salad, and some of them did not take their muddy boots off at the doorstep, and some of them preferred their beer to their hard liquor or their champagne, and we had some good Turkish carpets ruined, didn't we?
Do you remember? Oh, yes. Oh, that was so sad. Oh, one evening we had brought in all this champagne from France, and we made a plan with one another to see how much champagne one must drink in order to have a hangover the next day. You must drink quite a bit of champagne, it is true. And we all did our own part in making sure we accomplished our mission. You and I especially, we felt quite good the next day.
Well, I can tell you, Saturday night is the proper night to do that experiment.
Or Friday, so you'll have 2 days for
Indeed.
recovery.
Well, you know, I can still imbibe a pint of whiskey a day, so, you know, champagne is a little lightweight.
I don't know if it's good for your stomach, which at times has given you some ailments over the years. Isn't that right, my dear
Yes.
Jimmy?
Well, I remember back at 21 years old, just coming out of the College of New Jersey at Princeton, that I didn't think I was going to make it past 21. I think I said to Billy Bradford, one of my good friends and roommates, I said, something on the order of, I am too dull and infirm now to expect any extraordinary things in this life. For my sentiments for many months past intimated to me not to expect a long or healthy life. But here I am,
You keep on going.
63. You keep me young, dear.
Thank you.
Ah,
Let's tell them about Inauguration Day.
oh, that was exciting, wasn't it? Yes, there were so many people there. My goodness, it was exhausting though for me.
I could have gone all night. It was one of the first times we'd ever had inauguration and then a ball right after the event. And we must have danced until well past midnight.
That's what the paper said, and that's what we did.
I thought my poor little Jemmy was just going to fall right over and crumple into pieces. He looked so tired.
I'd rather have been in bed.
I could have danced all evening. Oh, I was so happy. I was surrounded by all those wonderful people, people whose minds I had never had the fortune to meet such intelligent people, such wisdom. And all I need to do to make a new friend, offer you a little bit of snuff from my snuff box.
Yes, indeed. That is a habit Mrs. Madison does not share with me.
Now, I've been told I should give it up, but there are some things that you just won't give up in life, and snuff is one of them.
I shall endure that from you, my dear.
Thank you very much. Might be a little Jimmy.
Yes, well, yes, indeed. Well, what was exciting about there was some drama, actually, because I was tired. First we had to go to the ceremony. Then we had an open house at our F Street house. Then we had to go to Long's Hotel, which was right across from the Capitol, for the dancing to start. But people got so invigorated, it got warm and stuffy in there, such that the ladies began to faint. So the gentlemen were taking them out, and we were trying to figure out what was making them faint. Well, they couldn't breathe. So they had the transom windows up above. They smashed them all, allowed the fresh air to come back in, and the dancing did resume until midnight, just like the newspaper said.
We would not let anything stop us from celebrating.
No.
We were truly shattering all those glass ceilings, so to speak.
What do you think, my dear? I have never been one to be too concerned about what the public thinks, but isn't it odd that this little war that's happened now seemed to have curbed some of the Federalist ideas, and people have come to a common conclusion that we are together in this country, and we can stand as a republic, and we can work together, even though it took going through a war that we were not literally prepared for.
I can remember before the war, I was a Virginian, and that is all I was. And after the war, I was an American, and that is all I was. And for the first time, our national identity, it transformed. It pained me to see our home burn, but we rebuilt it so much stronger, so much better than it was ever before. Our entire community around us and the entire nation as a whole, we bonded together for the first time. Federalist or Democratic, Republican, it didn't matter. We were American.
It's a good feeling, because all of you sitting out there, I know, are with us and behind us, and will allow America to stand on the world stage along with all the other world powers. I have much confidence in you, because you, as I said in Federalist number 51, the people are the only legitimate fountain of power. And it is from them that the constitutional charter, under which the several branches of government hold their power, is derived. Well, do you think we can bore our audience any longer?
Oh, I think they are perfectly amused. Well, what questions do you have for us? Yes.
Okay, so you just, Ms. Madison, you just said you were 63. May I ask how old your wife was, whatever?
I'm 17 years younger.
17 years younger.
Good
Okay.
thing we have a progressive administration.
Okay, did you
My
have
girl never tells her age, though. Do that.
and did you have any children?
We don't have children together. I do have children from a previous marriage. One passed. Yellow fever epidemic in Philadelphia took both my first husband and my son on the same day. But I do have a son, Payne, who I also birthed from my first husband. And yes, we raised him together. And James is his father, more than his original father was ever able to be, because he died so young.
Thank you.
Of
Thank you, ma'am.
course.
Yes, young man.
So I noticed that you performed scenes from the play. Is there any way that is there some way I could see the whole play, or I'm really into presidents?
Well, I suppose if there's any kind of acting juice left in me, we're looking for sponsors. Not at the time, not at this time, young man.
Not in this area.
Okay, not in this area.
Yeah, not in the Boston area.
Okay.
Mrs. Madison, you referred to your wet style of dressing, and that was one of the first things I noticed. Is it more French than English since we were at war with England?
Oh, our fashion was always taken from the French, even throughout our American Revolution and thereafter. The French have always been sort of the leaders in couture. However, my style of dressing, also amongst my Quaker friends, was that my skin was a bit more revealed than perhaps the Quakers would have liked it to be. My assets were displayed perhaps a little more than the Quakers would presume it proper. However, I felt very strongly, as the president dressed, that I create an image that was very regal, but not royal. And that was a very important distinction that I wanted to make, was that I, as the leader of our nation, or the partner of the leader of our nation, would represent something that was someone who was austere and someone who was inspiring and respected, but not bow down to that person. So I chose to take on a somewhat unique approach to dressing, including the headdress that I wear, which some refer to as turban, and the wearing of pearl jewelry, which I found to be much less audacious than the diamonds that were so common amongst the royals. And now my turban's all coming undone. But amongst those things, with the headwear and the pearl jewelry, and we would call this more so the Regency fashion of dressing, the high waistlines, the empire waistlines. This fashion was taken also from France, but it was carried on through England as well. But this fashion, of course, taken from much more exotic locations, but the pearls are all our own. We are very fond of pearls here in America, and this is our jewel.
Indeed. And this is the jewel that wears the jewel.
Madison,
Well,
behave yourself. Yes,
these are friends in good company.
of course, they're all coming to our squeeze on Wednesday.
They better. Someone
So,
else?
I have been.
Isn't your name Mr. Madison?
Much older, sir. I understand I have been privy to a couple of the letters that you wrote while you were suffering with your knee there in Philadelphia. It seemed from those letters that you had a very happy life together. Perhaps you could elaborate on some of that exchange.
I think we should break out the champagne.
Well, let's tell them a little bit about how we met, first of all. I was newly widowed, and I received word from a gentleman named Aaron Burr that his friend and his fellow classmate, Mr. Madison, had a bit of affection for me. And then I had received letters from my sister telling me that he burned for me so completely, and that I must come and extinguish the flames.
She consented to every word I said. She took it down verbatim.
I'm not very good at extinguishing flames. I seem to be around when the flames begin, more so than when they are being put out, in more ways than one. Nevertheless, he was exactly who I needed. A man who was a protector, a man who was of the same class as I, and a man who was deeply involved in politics, which I've always felt very strongly for, and always felt that women should have a part in politics as well. You see, in the early days of our nation's existence, we ladies were not allowed in the Congress Hall. And the men make quite a fuss about one another when we're not around. They get quite violent with one another, and fists tend to get thrown at one another's faces. But bring a few ladies in the room, and the whole atmosphere changes. They start behaving and speaking nice to one another. And so I brought the ladies of Washington City into our Congress Hall so that we could watch and observe as our government met in some of those early meetings of our administration. And it changed the entire environment and setting and atmosphere of our whole government. And I remember, I do recall, we walked in, one gentleman was given a speech where he was using obscenities, and then he said, "Excuse me, ladies, I will have to start again." And suddenly the speech was administered without a single obscenity whatsoever. That was quite unusual.
Well, that man could adjust, could he not?
No, he could.
Virtue is always what we're looking for in a republic.
Oh. But Jimmy and I were always well suited for one another, and it seemed very obvious from the start that we were opposites and we attracted quite well.
I was also persistent. I didn't skip a day without calling on her. I remember going out riding, and we were talking about flowers and fashion, and Payne came along with us, and I
He is
just...
my son.
Yes, my stepson. I did adopt him, and he came along on the rides, and I just wouldn't stop until she said yes.
He's a diligent creature.
I am. I also come prepared. Now, I knew that little James Madison was probably going to be last on your list because everyone thought that I would never be married. The one try I had, I was turned down. One of the signers of the Declaration, William Floyd from New York, he had a 16-year-old daughter that I proposed to. She said yes. And I even asked Mr. Jefferson, do you think I should propose to a 16-year-old girl? And he said, yes, go ahead, which I did. And she said yes, but changed her mind later and dumped me for a younger medical student. So not only did I think that I would remain a bachelor because I just got so involved in politicking and statesmanship and studying and books. I just consume books like they're food. It's good fiber. Anyway. So yes, I asked some people whether I could have an introduction so Mrs. Todd could at least be aware of my existence. Because every bachelor knew of Mrs. Todd's existence. In fact, she had all of male Philadelphia in the pouch. Indeed, you did. And so I asked none other than Mr. Washington and Lady Washington if they might make an introduction and a recommendation on my behalf, which they did. So I'm hoping that that gave me some traction, so to speak. And I know she was serious because she was willing to get evicted, so to speak. Read out of meeting is what they call it for the Quakers. And I remember asking you to marry me as early as June. And she said, I'll think about it. I'm going on a vacation already. I plan to visit my relatives down in Virginia, and I will give it serious consideration. So I thought I had hope at the time. So I wrote her every day, but I wasn't getting a response back. And I thought, oh, she's dumped me. Of course she's
I
dumped me.
think they call it playing hard to get.
Well, you did. Well, that's nice, dear, but you're also very brave in so many ways because she's not admitting to the fact that she became quite sick down in Virginia. The fact that she contracted malaria. So not only did Mrs. Madison get a mild form of yellow fever and survive, she also contracted malaria and survived. So her physical constitution is much stronger than mine.
You are prone to your fits at times of stress and exhaustion.
Yes, I am. To the point where sometimes I have a complete suspension of intellectual function. I don't know how to explain it.
It's quite alarming when I saw for the first time he is unable to stand and his eyes glaze and he looks lost. And it can last anywhere from a couple seconds to well over a minute and more. And now I've begun to recognize the signs, and I know if he's very tired or anxious about something, that he's more prone to these fits. However, you have always been a little fragile creature. One of the things I love about you, my little Applejack.
That's what Washington Irving called me. He was fishing for a job as an ambassador to France. He didn't get it. He came specifically to one of Mrs. Madison's squeezes to try and get recruited, so to speak, and it didn't work. He's a masterful writer, but he's not necessarily a great diplomat. Any other questions?
Just a comment. Mrs. Madison, you seem a woman ahead of your time for the period of time that you come from.
Thank
Would you say that would be fairly
Well,
accurate?
I don't know if I'm a woman ahead of my times. I would say I'm a woman who doesn't see the normal boundaries at which a woman's role is generally suspended. I believe women are equal partners in any sort of partnership, whether it be marriage or politics. Certainly we speak together very often about politics. We composed many of his papers. We helped to collect and compose them together, and I helped to organize many of his government papers, and eventually did sell them off to the government after my dear Jemmy, we won't talk about. It's hard to talk about when someone passes, when they're sitting right next to you. Get that drift, so to speak.
Well, luckily, she is 17 years younger, so it
And
was
I wonder,
expected.
it survived well into my old age. In fact, not only did I help to collect all the papers and sell one collection of them off to the government, but also I was given my own seat in Congress. Which
You were?
I was. It was an actual seat, a chair, so to speak, and given the honors. And I was walked into the Congress Hall whenever I joined in the session. I was given postal rights for the rest of my life. Never had to pay for a stamp again. That's a pretty beneficial deal, if you ask me. But of course, we did live very modestly in my later years. We were not, unfortunately, we had some financial problems with my son, which has been a very difficult and heartbreaking experience for us both over the years. And because of a lot of those financial difficulties, my son is a malady of dicing and carding, and a lot of the money that we gave to him to help pay off his debts was soon lost, and we were faced with some very difficult predicaments. And I only owned one nice gown in my older years, and I wore that gown whenever I went out in Washington City. Every single time I went out, that was the gown I was seen in public. I had nothing more. But we do what we need to do, don't we?
We do. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I believe that is the end of